So, no? Okay. The clicker should work. Okay. Thank you. No? All right. So we're going to think about the three dimensions of differentiation. Raise your hand if you, when I say Tomlinson and Imbo, do those names mean something to you? Okay. A model for differentiation that's used a lot in K-12, but we're going to see how that works in working with English learners. I've been doing a lot of workshops on differentiation, and I've been doing a lot of workshops on equity and inclusion, and it dawned on me that there's this big intersection between the two. So in our session here on engaging learners really fully, it's all about making sure that all learners have access points and equal access points to what we're doing in the classroom. So we're going to see how that differentiation model works. And then we're also going to see how to optimize learning through the decisions we make about our content, our process, the way we teach, and the products that learners create. Every so often, we're going to do a turn and talk. So audience members online, Drew will be here to moderate your chat and sort of summarize and report out on your behalf as we go along, okay? So, quick agenda. This is funny. The clicker's not working and the nor is the I might just have, no? Okay. Well, we're going to look at the differentiation model and sample lessons, reflect along the way, and then do some action planning at the end. So first of all, raise your hand if you're an ESOL educator. How about ABE, GED? How about IET? Anybody? In what area? What? Just shout out. We won't. Pharmacy tech? Subpara? Okay, great. And then how many of you have multi-level classes? Okay, I'm guessing after I ask you a few questions that everybody might want to raise their hand in a minute. Do learners in your classes have different expectations about teaching and learning? Raise your hand if that's true for you. People in the chat, you can do the same. Different comfort levels with different technologies, virtual, in-person, right? Oops, sorry, we went. How about different levels of literacy or different levels of oral proficiency? And there might be a mismatch. So some people have really high oral skills and less, develop literacy and vice versa. How about access to English outside of the classroom? And how about different personalities and ways of being in the world and different motivations? So now if I ask you the question, do you have a multi-level class? How many of you would raise your hand? I mean, every class is multi-ability, right? And is made up of people with a variety of backgrounds. So it's so critical that we provide opportunities for everybody to have access to our work. It brings we have all these different areas. It's different proficiency levels, different cultural backgrounds, different individual factors, situational factors. I think that last one is particularly important right now when you think about what learners are experiencing. I have students in Minnesota reporting that oftentimes students, they're not coming to class out of fear right now. More and more programs are going to high flex, so learners can still attend. So many, many different factors are contributing to a very multi-level, diverse classroom, all right? So let's see what we can do to do our best to meet the needs of everybody as much as we possibly can using the differentiation model, okay? So we're gonna talk about content, process, and products. So content meaning the what we teach, okay? For example, is it about economics? Is it about navigating the community? Is it healthcare? It's the what we teach, but also the language that learners need to be able to access information in a lesson or a unit. And we'll see that we can differentiate content by varying the level of complexity of the different texts we use, different modalities. Maybe some learners listen while some other learners read for information. We can give a choice of topics within a larger theme. And then what we're going to talk about a lot in all of the samples is choosing materials that really reflect the multiple voices and perspectives of learners who are in our classes, okay? We also can look for sources. For example, how many of you have used StoryCorps from National Public Radio? It's firsthand accounts of families, and here we have a father telling his son about his immigration story, Or we can use Newsela, which I know you have to have a subscription to now, but there are other sources for high interest texts. But we can look for texts that reflect our learners. And we'll see a sample lesson later on where it looks at immigrants running for office in their local communities. Okay. So just thinking, well, what content really matters to the learners I serve? So whether, you may be using a textbook, right? And the theme is on community, or the theme is on, health, but then what are subtopics that you could draw from? And we're going to see how to draw from authentic materials, Newsela, other sources, and the learners themselves, okay? That's going to be a big part of it too. How can we create content for our classes that come from the learners? All right, process is the how we teach. Like, what do we do in our classes in ways that are equitable, inclusive, and really draw learners in? And then we can do that by having different task complexity for content. We talked about text complexity, but here some students you ask them, find at least 3 people to talk to. Okay, so then you have students who might talk to 10 people. But if somebody only talks to 3 people, they've had success with the task. Some people might be given a paragraph frame while others aren't. Some might be given sentence frames while others aren't. You can provide scaffolds like graphic organizers to use while reading. And the learners themselves can take on roles where they really support one another in the classroom. So those are all ways to differentiate for process. And then finally, product. So the products are our assessments, the end, what we create. We maybe would have some students write a whole essay, some students write a paragraph, some students write a few sentences, some write one, right? So everybody doesn't have to be doing the same thing. Or modalities like oral or written or type of product. So maybe some students create a graph of some kind, some create a podcast, maybe some create a report, but they're all creating these meeting the same learning outcomes. So you could use the same assessment tool or maybe a simple rubric or checklist looking for certain features, but they can be different products, right? Depending on your learner's strengths. And this is all based on learner readiness. Learner interests, readiness, and learning profiles, okay? So, is anybody thinking, come on, how can I do all that? Are you thinking that right now? Like, how can I do that? So let's think about, as we look at some samples today, think about something you teach and what's one small thing you could do differently, all right, to differentiate for product or content or process. It doesn't have to be all 3 all of the time, okay? Also, know that you're going to have to get to know your learners well before you'll know what sorts of adjustments to make to your practice, right? So it all starts with drawing on your learners' funds of knowledge, first acknowledging that whether your learner comes with an advanced degree from their country or they were a farmer, they all bring funds of knowledge. That farmer will know about, entrepreneurship by taking their goods to market. They'll know a lot about math, measuring out a field, right? We can also think about bridging social language to more academic language, like more oral language to more academic language. That's a great way to kind of level the playing field, so to speak. And that's a theme we're going to see today. And then finally, we're going to think about how to make thinking visible. So, adult learners all come with an intellect, lots of great ideas, things they want to share. But do they always have the language? Do they always have the English language to express those thoughts? Right? And while we would encourage translanguaging, which I'll talk a little more about later, learners need the academic language to make that visible. So we'll see how it's so important to provide a lot of language frames to make that thinking visible. All right, so we're going to go through some samples now. And with the samples for each one, please consider, what do you notice about content, process, and then any products in the samples that we might get to, the outcome, what they finish with, that you believe would serve to make a lesson more equitable and inclusive, okay? How are we using these differentiation principles to really bring full participation into our classes with adult learners with such varied backgrounds, okay? All right, so we're ready for the first sample. And anytime we're doing something, again, friends online, if you just, you'll use the chat to respond. All right, the first example is, let's suppose you're doing a lesson on talking about interests and hobbies. How many of you have seen a lesson on that theme, maybe in your textbooks or in your curriculum, maybe beginning, high beginning? All right, so our targets are, we're gonna talk about our free time activities using simple present tense. We're gonna collect information about our peers, our classmates, and we're gonna analyze some data and present results in a report or a bar graph, okay? Does that seem like a tall order for a beginning level class? But I wanna show you, I think we can do this with the right supports, the right decisions about content, process, and product, all right? So what do you like to do with friends and family? I'd like you to take out your phones and see if you can find a picture you'd like to share with a partner next to you. I'll start by, this is my son Remy teaching me how to make bagels. So I love to bake and cook, and he loves to bake and cook. So when he visited us, he taught me how to make bagels from scratch. And then I also love kayaking. So I'm gonna give you a second. So you have like 1 minute, show a favorite activity to a partner here. And at home, you can just be thinking about that favorite activity. Okay. All right. All right, we'll come back together. When you hear the harmonica, in-person folks, that'll be our signal to come back. So of course, this is something learners, well, everybody loves to share a picture, don't they? Right? Now, not everybody in a class would necessarily have a photo to share. If you're teaching online, those could be sent to you by WhatsApp, and you, the teacher, could share those. If you're teaching face-to-face, learners can just walk around and we can kind of jot down some of the activities we found. Some learners may not have the phone handy, so we can give them a Post-it note and they can share something written, okay? So we have photos here, and then we have short statements or words, single words. I like biking, swimming, exercise, okay? Imagine you have learners who are really emergent reader writers, not literate, don't have a lot of writing. What could they do to share their interests or hobbies? There we go. Sure, right? So here we've created an image on the, we could use our whiteboard in the class. You could use a whiteboard tool if you're teaching online. And so this can be now the content. This is the content for our lesson on like personal activities, interests, hobbies on the weekend. All right. Now, if you've been in workshops with me, you've probably heard me talk about one question survey a million times, and he's like, there she goes again. But raise your hand if you know what one question survey is. Oh, okay. One question survey is just that. It's a one question survey. So, and I, in my book, I have several examples, one on like your environmental awareness, one on different study skills you use to learn English outside of the classroom. But learners are given a prompt, a question, that has them elicit data about their classmates, okay? But this is a way to use one question survey using learner-generated language. So now that we'd have that image of all those different activities here, right? We can provide a prompt on the board and give a little flashcard, just a blank card to students, and they can create their own survey question. So, Drew, do you like exercising? Yes, yeah. Do you like biking? Yeah, okay. So we walk around the room once we have our question and we collect data from each other so that we end up with something that looks like that, right? Now, the thing is, we want to talk about the data now. So learners need some language to talk about that data. So for example, many people, half the class. So the blue, I know those colors. My husband teased me because he's colorblind. He's like, those aren't different. But do you see blue? And I should have differentiated more. But many people in half the class are a little simpler than 3/4 of the class and 50% of the class, aren't they? Right? Because the greenish ones require some numeracy skills. So we can provide different types of language frames depending on our level of learners. So we're differentiating that instructional process there. And then finally, learners are going to use the data they collected to create a very simple product, either a simple bar graph, or when I said a report, the report at this level might just be filling in a couple of sentence frames, or you could give a bigger paragraph frame with things like, we found that most people like biking, or half the class likes cooking, or having a graph, a simple graph that's well scaffolded by giving them a blank to fill in, and all they have to do is color in the bars, okay? All right. So let's just, for this one, I'm going to walk through the ways that I would say I differentiated for those 3 domains, and then you'll add anything you'd like. And then the next samples, you'll deconstruct them yourselves through that same lens. So for example, we have content that's based on a learner-generated input, right? So it's automatically self-regulated for level, right? The learners created it themselves, so we have a pretty good sense that they're going to understand it. But also it's content or topics that matter to them. We had text or graphic responses, right? The picture, words, images, mixed modalities, and then sentence or paragraph frames as scaffolds. That's part of our process. And then for product, they could draw a graph. Depending on your learners, if they're more advanced in their digital skills, they could potentially use Google Docs to create some kind of a, generate a graph. They could draw a graph if they're online and take a picture and send it to you, right? Or they can write a written summary. So let me pause for a moment. Just any quick questions about, now that you've had one sample, I've talked about content, process, and products as a lens for differentiation and equity and inclusion. Any quick questions here before we go to another sample? Or we'll go on. Yeah. We need to use the mic.
How would you do the 1 question survey online?
You can have a doc, like a Word doc, a Google Doc with numbered sentences is one way, and then just assign a question and have students go out to breakout rooms. That's one way. Anybody else have an idea? Yeah.
Zoom and Teams have a poll function.
Yep. You could use any kind of, and any polling function, right? Right. Yeah. Thank you. All right. We're good to go to the next sample? Okay. The next one, we're going to go kind of clear at the other end of the proficiency level. And I don't know if any of you are part of the TSTM, Teaching the Skills That Matter initiative in any of your states. I worked on the civics toolkit, and this lesson is from that. And I always love showcasing TSTM. So if you want to see the whole lesson, we have there you go, a QR code there if you're interested in seeing the entire lesson with all the different tasks and tools. Okay, this is a lesson that was designed for both ABE and Advanced ESL. Trying to get our toolbar out of the way there so I can click the slides. Sorry. Okay, so there's some language objectives, and then there's some content objectives. So, just kind of skim those. It's a speaking and listening lesson primarily. There's a little language development piece with pronunciation, a little bit of grammar with quantifiers. And then content-wise, we're learning about community engagement. That's the theme, okay? And we're going to analyze how our actions can, what we can do and how that can help our community, collect data, analyze data, Okay, and then share stories about community actions that might counter intolerance and build cross-cultural understanding. All right, so when my kids were little, I used to help out in their schools because I was an ESL teacher, and there were a lot of English learners, a lot of multilingual learners in the schools. So I would help, and this would fall under which category here? There are 5 categories of community engagement. What do you see there? Yeah, volunteering. Also, I did letters for Vote Forward. That would be an example of voting and political activity. Okay. I think we won't take the time right now, but think about what's something that you do. Okay, what's something that you do, and which category would it be? What's something that you do, and what category would it be? And we'll just elicit maybe 1 or 2 examples. Yeah.
Community building. I'm the assistant Cub master for my son's Cub Scout pack.
Great example. Thank you. Anybody else? Huh? Sorry? Charitable giving. Okay. Yeah. Many of us do that, whether it's through organizations or taking clothes to the Goodwill. Okay. So, right. Now, here's a sample, what you might end up with. This could be done on a whiteboard function if you're teaching online, or with Post-it notes in the classroom. So projecting the image, learners are invited to share what they have done. And remember, this was advanced English learners, or ABE. And so we can see recycling, block party, visit my mosque, attend school meetings, shoveled for a neighbor. So in essence, we have these terms: volunteering, charitable giving, voting, some of which you might think, well, you probably want to pre-teach all of that. Yes, or we can be learning kind of what those mean collectively. So by examples that students share, they're co-constructing definitions of these key terms that we're going to hear about more in the lesson. Okay? Any questions? Okay. So now, within this theme, we're going to do our first listening activity. We're going to hear from a gentleman in Reading, Pennsylvania, who owns a Dairy Queen. And your task is to consider these 5 areas of engagement: volunteering, voting in political activity, charitable giving, community building, and social responsibility. And think about which of those categories do Hamid's actions show or exemplify. Okay? And it'll be evident once we start the story. Okay. So let's see here. Ready? Oh. Uh-oh. What was that? Okay. We're trying to get to the video. All right. Just 1 second, friends. I'm going to share the video this time. Right. Well, here we have to share, and then we choose the video. There it is. Okay. Oh, yes. Thank you. Okay. Share. There we go. Okay. Are we good, everybody? And then, are we good online? Okay.
He split the proceeds 50-50. Beth Stanislawczyk is former president.
Do for their country.
Okay, we ready? Okay.
In tonight's Assignment America, Steve Hartman introduces us to a man who never stops asking and never stops doing.
When most people think of the American dream, they imagine all this country has to offer them.
There you go, folks. Have a wonderful evening.
But for 40-year-old Hamid Chaudhry, a Pakistani immigrant and owner of this Dairy Queen in Reading, Pennsylvania, that dream isn't just for the taking.
I'm part of the society, and when you belong somewhere, you have to give back.
A few years ago, after becoming a U.S. citizen, Hamid moved to Reading with his wife, a doctor. They have 2 children. For most people, that would be enough responsibility.
Make it a meal?
But Hamid wanted more. He began with Kumru Elementary.
Hi, Alexa.
Offering his services to school principal James Watts.
And I looked at him like, wow. Here's a guy, I mean, truthfully, businessmen in this day and age are not coming to schools and saying, what can I do for you?
Chocolate here, strawberry there.
What Hamid offered was to host the school fundraisers. He eventually began fundraising for other organizations as well.
A lot of ice cream for every kid.
Soccer teams, Crime Stoppers. Every night it seemed Hamid was sponsoring a different charity. He split the proceeds 50-50. Beth Stanislawczyk is former president of the Kumru PTO.
A lot of times, too, he is extra generous in what he gives you because you think, now, how did we make that much money tonight? But
He gives you more than you made?
Oh, yeah. He's been known to do that several times.
Do you have a problem saying no? Could you say no?
I can, but I prefer not to.
Help yourself.
All told, Hamid has said yes to more than 100 community organizations. And that's not even counting his individual acts of charity.
I wasn't even thinking that anybody was going to help me in any way. I was thinking I'm not going to be able to pay for my husband's funeral. And, you know, then he steps up and does something like that.
When Alicia Paggerly lost her husband Kyle, a deputy sheriff in the line of duty a few months ago, Hamid was the first to step in, throwing a fundraiser to cover all her expenses at the time.
He gives you hope. People like Hamid definitely helped me to believe they're still good people.
Dressing?
And yet, Hamid is convinced he's the lucky one here.
I'm making an honest living. I'm part of the society. I'm raising my kids. I'm practicing my faith, being a Muslim. So I'm able to do all those things in this great land of ours. And when I say God bless America, I mean it from the bottom of my heart. I mean it, God bless America.
All right. So now turn and talk for a few minutes, a couple minutes. Which of these did you see evident? Which of these categories did you see evident in Hamid's actions? Whoops. Oh gosh, there we go again. Just direct me up.
There you go. Nailed it.
Okay. You have like a couple minutes. Turn and talk. Which actions of community engagement were most evident in Hamid's actions? Okay? Can you read those from there? I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I don't know. It's the one before. It's the slide before that it's. Just give me a sec. Sorry. Help me here. Is that Annie? Can you help me get back? Is that a little better or no? Is that better? Thank you. All right. Who's like to share one thing they noticed? What's one action and corresponding community engagement? Yes.
He's taking care of the students in the schools. And part of that, too, is he's saying, no, I'm the one who's blessed.
Absolutely. And so which of those categories would you say that best exemplifies? Or maybe multiples, right? Right? What? Many, exactly. Community building, volunteering. So anybody else? So what's another thing, another action that you saw exemplified in one of these categories? Some over and beyond, charitable giving.
Building by hosting the organizations, and he's just bringing the community in to help other organizations.
Exactly. Yeah.
Helping out the wife with a funeral, the widow with a funeral, is social responsibility, but also all the, yeah.
Right. All right. So well, I personally, when we developed the toolkit for teaching the skills that matter, and it's true in many of the materials I've developed and samples I provide for teachers, is I really want to think about what's going to resonate with the students that are in the classroom in front of me. And whose voice is not other than like the native English speaker voice. So I do a lot of interviews with people, both those born in the US, but others, to tell their stories as part of instruction. So that's one thing I want to highlight there. Okay, I just need to move. There we go. And then, okay, great. There we go. Now, that was our first listening task, and it only required you to listen for the main ideas, didn't it? I mean, you could answer the question of which category without having to listen for a lot of detail, correct? Would you agree? So the second listening, when you listen again, and this is all in that toolkit with the QR code I shared, or just go to Teaching the Skills That Matter at links, and you'll find the whole toolkit with different lessons for different themes. The next task is much more detailed listening, okay? But using Jigsaw. So half the class has one set of questions, half the class has another set of questions, some of which are fairly lower order, like just listening for some key ideas, but some that require more analysis. We're not going to try that. We're not going to listen again, but I invite you to take a look at how this in itself is a sort of process of scaffolding. First, just getting the big ideas, listening again, but by using Jigsaw, only having to listen for half the information. And then the A's become the experts of their question, the B's of their questions, and now they can stand, find a partner, and then interview each other without showing their paper, but interview each other to see what they found out, and then complete the A and the B grids. Okay? Does that make sense? So this is for a very advanced level, but of course we'll see later with a sample reading that you can do this Jigsaw type approach with lower levels as well. Now, the other thing, this lesson does have quite a bit of vocabulary. And, knowing a word is one thing, but knowing how to say a word in such a way that it's intelligible by others is so critical. And we often overlook that, right? Did you know that word stress and sentence stress has much more impact on intelligibility than mixing up b and v or o and okay? Or not saying th. Th has a very low functional load. It's in many varieties of English that people say duh for th. So that's not that important, but that's what people tend to teach. But in fact, we need to be integrating pronunciation practice with multisyllabic words all the time as we present this. So I'm going to say a word from the lesson, and I'd like you just to put up your hand, a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. People online, you can just put a number in the chat. What word stress pattern do you hear? For example, responsible. You hear 2? Good. Yeah. Bum, 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 right? And if you see a lot of hands that are off, and of course, I'd probably have students hold their hand behind their back and then hold it up when you say go. Same thing online. Put your number in the chat and send when I say go so that they're really giving their genuine response. And inevitably, there will be some students who don't hear or notice the patterns. But then you just keep at it and you tap, you clap. I love humming. I love using my body. Okay. All right. Do you want to do a couple more? Okay. How about demonstration? Demonstration. Go. Okay. Bum, 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 bum. 5. Yep. You've seen. Okay. How about fundraiser? Fundraiser. Bum, bum, bum. Good. Okay. Good. How are they doing online there? They're doing great. Good. How about charitable? Charitable. Bum, 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 bum. So what does each bubble represent? A syllable. And what does the big bubble represent? The stress syllable. So I do this all the time. I mean, all the time in my instruction and at all levels. So if you're teaching, even, to anything more than one syllable, maybe it's working on jobs and because, for example, if I say committee, what do you think I just said? But I was trying to say committee. if my word stress is misplaced, it really does affect intelligibility. So, all right. So that's yeah, little. And we do have all the tools and tasks in that teaching the skills that matter. And then finally, we already saw one question survey with beginners with learner generated language, but look how you can then use it with more advanced students on our topic of how likely are you to volunteer at your child's school? How likely are you to give to charitable causes? All right. So learners do that same activity where, again, one question. So each learner gets one question, but if you have, let's say you have 20 students and you're 18 students, I would recommend having 6 questions total with 3 people with the same question in the room. Because then they can work together on their theme and then they can do the analysis and talk about the data and create graphs. So it's the same steps we saw earlier of collecting information, analyzing the information we gathered, giving them the language they need to talk about it, and then creating some kind of a chart or a graph, okay? All right, and then some things that students could do. I didn't do this exact same lesson, but something very similar. It was in a community-based program with very low tech. So we had flip chart paper and markers, and we did a gallery walk. So we just plastered those up around the room. Students walked around, and then they presented their graph to others in class. So great practice with presentation skills. All right, so how did we differentiate for these 3? Let's give you, I'm gonna give you about 4 minutes. Okay, and when you hear the harmonica, we'll come together. And if you don't have time to talk about all 3 of those, it's okay. But what did you notice about my decisions about content, process, how I taught the lesson, and product that relate to our theme of differentiating to be more inclusive? Okay? And then we'll see how your ideas compared to some of the things I thought of. So find a partner, about 4 minutes until I blow the harmonica. Okay? And friends online, you can just share ideas in the chat, and then Drew and I will gather some of your thoughts as well. All right. All right. So let's just hear a couple examples. Do we have someone in the chat who'd like to share an example? You know what? Let me get my glasses on. So let's see. Okay, so Brianna shares that we hit many areas listing becomes visualizing, then visualizing became writing, and writing became speaking. Yeah, I love the way you put that, Brianna. Thank you. And then different products, right? So depended on their proficiency level. Thank you, Christy. Christy, hi, Christy. I know Christy. Okay, how about in the room here? An example of any one of the categories. We don't have to go in any order. Something you'd like to share that stood out for you. Anyone? Yeah. Hi.
Sure. So at the very end, the product, so the different options for the charts, they could have done a pie chart, a bar chart, and then also the presentation. It could have been just drawn, stuck up on the wall. Maybe some folks made a slide if they were going to do a slide presentation. Yeah.
Yeah. What else? How about process? You shared some ideas when I was walking around.
Just process having them listen twice, and then the second having the 2 sets of questions, so you could have an easier set of questions even. And
Absolutely. Right. Yeah.
This is how different people take it in, how quick they take it in, how slow they take it in.
Right. And so considering that, we're making sure we have different, like I said, entry points, right? Thank you. Yeah.
Your activity on defining the 5 areas was building the schema for continuing the
Exactly. Building schema for the listening. And then remember, I was suggesting that by having them share their own experiences with community engagement, we're using those experiences as a way to define the terminology itself, right? Okay. Now, it's not strictly differentiation. I mean, again, it's that differentiation model that inspires me to be more inclusive, right? So choosing Hamid, it's not really obvious how is that differentiation, but I could have chosen somebody else. So why did I choose the story of Hamid? Yeah, somebody that students could really relate to, right? And I also think it's sort of a counter narrative to some of the discrimination or, anti-Islamic, sort of sentiments that are present in whatever group of the day or moment or whatever, right? So, okay, thank you. These are the things that I noted. You can see a few. I think we touched on a lot of these, right? And the pronunciation piece, just to give learners supports for the language they're going to need to talk about what matters to them, right? And then the products, having different options. Thank you. Good. All right. Okay, let's do another one. This is the idea of using universal themes as well as learner-generated content. So, and also it's really focused a lot on the idea of building a lot of oral language before and as a bridge to writing, okay? Which Patsy and I wrote about in your wonderful book, Kirsten and Joy. Yeah, so what do you see here? Who are these people? What do we see? Sorry?
I see a mom, a grandma, maybe a son, a daughter, or a granddaughter.
Which one's in a home, like a residence? The one on, okay, and on the right? Or I used the word home and residence. I meant like my house home. You're so, like, but which one is, which one is at home? Maybe the one on the left, and which one is maybe at an assisted living or on the right. And then what's the evidence? How do we know? You see nurses, right? Like personal stuff on the fridge. Everybody notices that, right?
Stuff in the pictures.
Right, exactly. Okay, so this lesson, we're going to learn a little bit about how we have different perspectives or views on supporting our aging parents or working with the elderly. This lesson actually came out of work I did with Carlos Rosario in Washington, D.C., and we were doing lessons and activities on learner-centered instruction, and some of the folks were in the CNN, thank you, long day, course. And so one of the learning outcomes was developing competence and understanding different cultural views around caring for the elderly. But we all agreed that that's just an interesting topic. It's kind of a universal topic and theme. So we start off with a set of key questions around a theme. So I meant to say this earlier, that everything I'm doing today, I hope you see that You don't have to use the video I used. You don't have to use any of the content. It's the techniques, right? The strategies, the process, the decisions. So here you could be thinking about a lesson you're doing on any number of topics, whether it's employment or health, and you come up with a series of questions. Here it is, where to live in your community or family, where do the elderly usually live? Who has the responsibility of caring for aging parents? And who makes medical decisions? So the learners are invited to stand, mingle, and interview people and just take notes for a pretty extended period of time. I mean, I've used this lesson with our practicum students where we've co-taught, and we gave them a good, 15, 20 minutes at least to gather information from each other and just take notes, okay? So, and you don't need to write full sentences. I mean, it might be they usually live with the eldest son, or they usually live with the eldest daughter, or they usually live in an apartment on their own, or they usually live in assisted living. I mean, it just would depend, right? Who has the responsibility, and then who makes decisions. So once the learners have collected all this information, now their information is the basis and the content for our lesson, okay? Next, we're going to build some more academic language for their writing, really focusing on speaking first. So groups are given one of those key questions. They go back to their notes that they took, and group one would look at where do the elderly usually live according to the data we collected, who has the responsibility, and who makes decisions. So the learners are just going to talk through what they noticed. So most people said that their aging parents live with the children. Or in many communities, aging parents live with their parents. Or in Cambodia, people, I meant to have a line after that, normally live with the oldest son, but in Argentina, people, okay, so excuse the typos. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I know. Well, ask the class. No, but I mean, people, yeah, so parents at a certain age that once they are, whether it's, I mean, I know, that's a great question. I don't have an answer for you. I think it's really contextual and culturally bound, and I would ask the class, all right? I would ask the class, right? Right, absolutely. And, again, thank you for bringing it up, because this lesson was developed in relation, it's specifically responding to the learning outcomes in the curriculum in the CNA, thank you, CNA curriculum. It was understanding cultural perspectives around caring for the elderly. That was the learning outcome. So we kind of built this lesson around it and tried to create a lesson that was very learner-centered. Okay? Thank you for asking. That's such a great question. So now they've collected all their information and will then use that to write. And then they can use a paragraph frame. So, the ways families in our class treat the elderly are similar in several ways. They often live with their children, for example. But the thing is, this will be very grounded in whatever it was the class said or felt or explained to one another, okay? All right, so questions, comments? I'm going to have you chat again. So just to review, we had look at the pictures, build a little background, build some schema, do the interviews with one another. Again, this could be on any theme. Analyze the information gathered, kind of talk through it orally, and then do some writing with a paragraph frame, or without a paragraph frame if they don't need it, or different paragraph frames with more or less information provided. All right, so this time I'm just going to give you a couple minutes to talk about one of the three you choose. Okay, ready? Okay, go. So friends online, just one of those: content, process, or product. What's something that stood out for you?
I can, when there are questions online, I can read them.
Okay, or if they have, okay, we need to differentiate it so they can read
I'll just grab the mic.
when the time comes. Yeah. Well, what I did is
Okay. No, I'm loving this. This is what I needed probably more than next door. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. That was just a couple minutes this time. So we're going to start. Do we have any examples from our friends online, Drew? Drew's going to start us off with one of our friends online.
Brianna says she likes how the paragraph frames are so customizable to the language level of the students. Also working with smaller groups and having everyone come together to discuss it.
Great. Yeah, so I hear that, and that's definitely, well, both process and then product. Like the product was the writing was the product, but we used a paragraph frame in order to create that product, right? Yeah, thank you, Brianna. Someone else, yeah.
I look like I wanted to talk. The building aspect of language, and it was part of the process, but it was also a product because you gave them the support they needed to be able to talk about what they researched and the data they collected.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, thank you, sir. Yeah.
The different language used by different income groups, and code switching.
Exactly. And they could be asked to make see what they noticed. What did they observe? Can they notice? Can they infer anything or make any observations? To your point about language, you could do a whole mini lesson in here on comparative forms as well. Like you could really highlight and do a whole lesson on as, whereas, all but, or whatever, right? Is that a hand up or?
We just talked about how in the content you're activating different learning styles with visual and auditory and getting up and moving around. And so you're hitting all those things for all different students.
Great. Yeah.
Talked about content and how the learners were the source of the content.
Exactly. And again, it's sort of a universal theme. We all have an experience with this, right? Yeah. So I want to encourage you to think too, if you are using a series, whether it's a series like Ventures or another series or whatever you're using, these things can be layered on top of everything you're teaching, right? You could start your lesson with something like this before you delve into a unit if you want to make it somehow personalize it or connect it more. Yeah. Thank you. Here are the things. I think we hit on that, right? Kind of a universal theme, learner-generated content. Also, the graphic organizer itself, the key question, the 3 categories, and then the chart where they discuss the generalizations they could make, and then using oral language. And then finally, paragraph frame for writing, and then varying the complexity. Great, thank you. All right, so the last one, I'm just going to really walk us through, okay? Because doing a whole jigsaw reading activity, we could use an hour to do that, couldn't we? Right? But I want to highlight, this is a lesson that'll be in a book that Daphne Greenberg is editing with Routledge on Foundations of Adult Literacy. It's a chapter on working with English learners. I'll have that chapter in there. And so how many of you do use Newsela? Or something like that. Or I know there are other sources now that are free. What are you using to find leveled texts to use with English learners or adult learners? ReadWorks, exactly. This happens to come from Newsela, and I realize it's one source that's a little more restrictive. I was working with Massachusetts, and they have a subscription for the whole state, so I continue to use this sample. my idea here is to choose topics that would be relevant. Let's say it's in November and you're talking about elections. Here we have, this is from Newsella, Asian Americans becoming more involved in elections is one reading. Michigan Muslims are thinking globally but running and voting locally. And of course, then you can change the lexile levels of those. So learners can choose a text depending on their interests, right? And you can then level those texts. But there's so many other sources you could draw from. It's just the idea of having real stories, authentic material. Well, it's modified, obviously, it's simplified, but authentic. And then things that resonate. You had your hand up, sir. Oh, Burlington English. Okay, great, great. Yeah, so the other thing too is that now we can use AI to create leveled texts, right? You might find that you could find an article from any news source and then, you know, plop it in and instruct it to level it down, level it up. I'm not sure about the ethics of that. I don't know, but you can help me there. That's why I'm going to all the AI sessions, because I'm trying to figure out what's okay. Are you with me there? Are you feeling the same way? Right? Yeah. Or sometimes I just craft a text, like I bring in information from multiple sources and then so then we do jigsaw or a paired reading, like have a pair of readings on the same theme. One group has this set of questions. Why are Michigan Muslims getting more involved in politics? What's unique about Dearborn? How are Muslim American organizations contributing to the greater political involvement? And then the same questions I am so sorry. What happened to my oh, you know what? Okay, I forgive me. I had a slide with the A was that one, and the other one was the Asian Americans. But I also had another sample where we're all going to read one reading. So forgive me, my bad. But you get the idea. Like people are reading for different things. You could use one of the articles and have different questions, or one group reads one and one group reads the other article. I just noticed that. So then learners present to one another what they found out. The A's tell the B's tell the A's. So this was an article that came out probably in like 2018, 2019. And the reasons they gave in the article were because of the travel ban and experiences with discrimination, to the question of why are Michigan Muslims getting more involved. So learners, you could provide some language frames according to the article, or the article said, or it showed that. And then they can get together and look for commonalities and differences between it from the two articles on this theme. Okay? And then now move on to a little bit of a personalization of that. So we're talking about politics, right? So do any of you teach in the civics programs, right? Or in November, do you often bring in the elections as a theme? So here is a small little project you could do. And you could do this in conjunction with anything you're teaching. I mean, any curriculum you're using. So who represents our community? Have students create teams about an interest. Do they want to learn about our local representation, our state, or our national representation? So I did it for, I would not just throw them out on the web. I would curate a list of local organizations, right? Like the website for your local school board, the .org, .gov websites. So they don't go on a wild goose chase, okay? So I'd give them a teacher curated list of reliable sites. And so here are the outcomes. Here's what I learned about St. Paul. Okay, so Hella Henderson's the chair of the school board, and we have Mayor Melvin Carter in my city, and then the president of the city council is Rebecca Noker. All right, so the students would work in their small teams to do the research about their local, national, or state or national representation with some key questions, like who represents us, when are they up for re-election, what issues affecting us does each support? So there you'd have to maybe do some other kinds of research, maybe find some campaign materials that they could look at, some flyers, and then do we see and hear diverse voices in our community? But this is the key here, and especially at this level, but at all levels, give them lots of options then for reporting their findings. They could do a fact sheet, because that's a very common, we often have a fact sheet, right, as an informational text when we're talking about things like politics. Or they could do a poster. an infographic, slides. They could do a podcast, or they could do a mock radio show and record that, okay? Where they've learned, not pretending to be the candidates, but what they've learned about their community, because that's a common topic, okay? Can you think of anything else, any other ways they could present the information they've gathered about their political representation? Yeah, it's kind of a long list, I know already, but yeah.
When I first started teaching adult ed in 2006, when the election came up, during the primary, I would have students pick their candidate and give me the reason why they wanted them. And I have them look up their voting history and everything, and they would go through it. Now it's a no-no now because politics are so divided.
I think we have to be courageous. I don't think it should, but that's my opinion. I think that, right? I think people need to be informed. People need to learn and be informed about their representation. But yes, things are different. I don't disagree. I agree with you, but I think we have to try to do what we can, at least. Yeah. So some of the things that I want to highlight from this sample is the diverse representation in the readings, right? Choice, the students can choose the topic. And if you do have, do you sometimes have students then themselves go into ReadWorks and choose an article on a theme, right? Exactly, good. And then you have leveled readings, jigsaw reading, a lot of peer support, a lot of graphic organizers, if you think back, because they had even when you're doing a reading and you have A and B, it's like, you have this, now we're gonna have to exchange information. We're filling in a chart. We end up with a chart of information rather than a paragraph. And that's a great way to help learners see that information can be presented in different ways. Also then the mind map for representation, right? Right. Also I had the circles inside each other, so local, national, local, state, national. It's a graphic organizer that represents the relationship. So those are all sorts of supports that help learners understand in different ways, okay? All right, so I just wanted to say, as before we wrap up here, now we did jigsaw samples. It was very advanced. Both the listening with Hamid was quite advanced, and that one was very advanced. But then earlier, I talked about learner-generated content. And actually, Joy, you're the inspiration for this in my chapter on reading, where you've talked a lot about learner-generated texts and learner writing and publishing that writing. And Laura Lenz, a local family literacy teacher in Minnesota, did a project where learners wrote about their home countries, and they created a booklet for the school. And these are excerpts from 3 different students from Liberia. Okay, so it's from Laura's materials, and these are excerpts that students wrote after drafting and feedback and peer support. And using that, then voila, we can just do a jigsaw, right? So some students answer the questions in group A, B, and C. So again, jigsaw, I used 2 samples that were very advanced, but jigsaw can be used at all levels. So again, this last sample from my book is a combination of both learner-generated material and using jigsaw. Okay, so I would be remiss not to have a word, translanguaging, I think is a big part of this as well. So the idea of really putting the learner's first language on the same level, like on level playing field with English, and really seeing all the learners' languages as multilingual learners as resources. So I love to share a few examples that were shared. Van Dyke, and I'm so sorry, I don't know her name by heart, and it's under my thing. So you see the reference, you'll see it if oh gosh, I hate this. Well, anyway. Using the home language for note-taking, like learners are doing these activities, there's no reason they have to take notes in English. They could be taking notes in any language. They're reporting out in English, right? Or giving them multilingual materials to support their work, talking to their peers about assignments or discussing assignments, brainstorming for assignments. Drafting was one of our high school teachers in our MA TESOL at Hamlin. She's a science teacher getting her ESL license. And she had her students draft their science report, their experiment reports. You know those reports that high school kids all have to write? they would talk them through in their first languages and draft in any way they wanted, if they wanted to write in Spanish or whatever, Karen, whatever. And then she said the quality of their English written reports was so much better because they had the cognitive ability to think about the experiment, and by being able to verbalize all of that, think it through in their home language first, they could do a much better job in writing the report in English. And that's a great, beautiful example of translanguaging. Okay? So, of course, when I say think in home language and speaking and listening in the target, I mean, of course they're going to do that. That's translanguage. And the thing is like really calling, like naming this and saying, remember, your language is a resource. So my book has a lot on differentiation. There's a whole chapter on that. The book Tomlinson has is beautiful. It's K-12 focused, but it has great ideas for us. And then there's the classic teaching multi-level classes. That's wonderful still. I think it ties in with our theme. What's one thing that you learned that you want to apply to your practice? And even if you're a teacher educator, you're not a classroom teacher. In fact, I meant to have that on my, like, who's a teacher educator, PD provider. I think of these topics myself all the time when I'm teaching teachers. So what's one thing from the session that you're going to apply right away? Turn and talk for a minute. And friends online, you can share ideas too. Let's see what we got here. Okay. Yeah, so friends at home, if you want to, if there's something you want to share. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Christy. Great. Great. So I'd love to hear, we have 1 minute for any final questions, or comments, any final burning questions or comments before we say goodbye. Sorry. Yeah, Joy.
Sean and I just really liked the last one where we went from very personal writing and then we got all the way up to the country, and then Sean was saying, and you could get into comparing countries and just go from very simple and get as complex as you can.
Yeah, and so I even hesitate to even say that there's a particular level for these samples because they can all be so variable depending on those decisions you make, don't you think? Right, yeah. Well, I can't thank you enough for joining me today. I'll stay around if you have any follow-up questions. And Drew reminded me if you are interested in taking a look at other ideas or things that inspired you, you can visit the Cambridge booth. My book is there. But I want to thank you all. This is a summary. It's not the whole slide deck but it's a summary of was in the slides. Rather than the slides themselves, I did a little snapshot or snippet of the different sample activities we did. But the first page of the handout it's the list of the different factors that we sometimes forget, a detailed chart of what does multi-level actually mean. So I think I hope you find that useful. I had already put a session overview, as you saw on WUVA? Yeah, WUVA. I don't know why, I never know how to say that. So thank you. Thank you all so much.